Meanwhile, the Democratic agenda continues to grow ever more radical. Joe Biden has now expanded background checks for gun sales by executive order. According to Axios, the Biden administration approved the largest expansion of background checks for gun purchases in decades on Thursday. The new rule, which will indeed be challenged in court, would require thousands of gun sellers to register as federally licensed firearm dealers. Now, the way that it works for people who are gun fans, as I am, we own many guns because Second Amendment and also personal safety. So the way that it works is if you buy a gun from a federally licensed agency, from a federally licensed firearms dealer, when you do that, then you actually do have to have a background check. Now, there's certain people where if you buy a gun from them, they're really not a federally licensed firearm dealer because it's like your cousin. And so the question is whether that has to go through a federally licensed firearms check, which will require criminal and mental health background checks on potential buyers. The only way to make this work in reality would be to have effectively a universal gun registry. Because once you sell me a gun, you don't know exactly where that gun is going to go. If you mean that I now have to register my gun, and that if I have to sell the gun to somebody else, they have to register the gun in their name, the only way for the government to actually track that is to know where all guns are at all times, which of course runs up directly against one of the purposes of the Second Amendment, that uncomfortable purpose that the founders actually were intending, which is the possibility of a well-regulated state militia protecting the rights of its citizens against the possibility of federal encroachment, which has a long and uncomfortable history in American politics, but does go all the way back to the founding. The rule announced on Thursday is intended to close the so-called gun show loophole. There is no gun show loophole, by the way. This is one of the great pieces of agitprop from the Democratic Party. If you go to a gun show, pretty much everybody at a gun show is a federally licensed firearms dealer. And you have to get a background check to buy a gun from them. The online sale loophole forces anyone to sell a firearm for profit to register with the federal government. Due to those loopholes, around 20,000 dealers currently operate without licenses and thus are not required to conduct background checks per the AP. Again, that is a very loose definition of what is a dealer. The new rule is the largest expansion of background checks for firearms purchases since the Brady Bill in 1993. But this is likely going to be pared back by the courts. Now, again, the likelihood this ends up becoming law, very slim. With that said, the general sort of attempt to pin firearm death on this sort of legal regimen is ridiculous. A huge number of firearms cases in which, say, a drug dealer shoots somebody, it's not as though the person isn't violating a bevy of laws in order to do that, including gun laws. We've had a wide variety of cases of, for example, school shootings where the gun was illegally obtained, where the person who was using the gun did not have a license to use the gun or the ability to use the gun, but did so anyway. In reality, laws on the books are not actually going to prevent this. The only way that you could theoretically prevent something like this, if the Democrats were being honest, is what they won't argue for, which is full-scale gun confiscation, which is what many of them want, but they won't say it out loud.